Good morning, everybody. This is a live extreme weather briefing. A recap on yesterday's Iowa event. Devastating. I couldn't be out there, honestly. I'm used to this feeling as a storm chaser of 25 years. You simply can't get all the tornadoes, but I was hyping this Iowa setup for days leading up to it, and just couldn't make the drive out there. I'm still in my recharging period. But this is a reminder to everybody to never stop chasing. I didn't live up to my own motto, and look what happened to me yesterday. I'm sitting here doing a briefing, trying to ask other chasers if I can use their footage in this live update. I am going to try to figure out how to Skype in guests, maybe FaceTime, something like that, so I can work in guests into these live updates, and then they can share their storm chasing experiences. I was just talking to storm chaser Vince with Twistor, and he got some incredible up-close footage of one of those tornadoes in Iowa. 45 preliminary reports so far across the northern half of Iowa. And of course, not all of those are going to go into the database as individual tornadoes, likely multiple reports of tornadoes. But initially, two supercells developed along that outflow boundary in the wake of that MCS. You can see those clusters of reports there. Then the storm off to the north of Waterloo went nuts as well. Isaac Slucci was on that, shot some incredible drone footage of that one. And also a damaging tornado, large tornado there. Brian Empfinger shot some drone footage of that. And then this cluster of evening supercells here went through eastern Iowa and also produced tornadoes. And interestingly, notice how there are no large hail reports with this event. And this happens quite a bit in these environments, even with extreme CAPE. On this day yesterday, there was a lack of extreme CAPE out there. Really about 3,000 CAPE, but that should be plenty of surface-based instability to produce large hailstones. But there are some other factors that are at play here. Geography is one. Usually in the high plains, the western Great Plains, banked up against the mountains, is where climatologically the largest hail anywhere in the world can fall here on the western edge of Tornado Alley. And a lot of that, I think, are based on the shear profiles. In the high plains, you have easterly winds in the lowest 2 kilometers before they flip around to westerly. Whereas in the mid-south and some of these Iowa setups, you're really depending on that 0 to 500 meter shear. A lot of that is by speed shear as well, rather than directional shear. Out here in the western high plains, you get directional shear where that flip-flop from easterly winds up to 2 kilometers and flipping around to westerly aloft. Big directional shear contribution there to the overall wind shear, and I think that plays a pivotal role in developing large hailstones, and especially if those cloud bases are based below where a majority of that wind shear is located, and a lot of that flip-flop happens above where the LCL is located in the high plains, and that shear within that zone seems to play a role maybe in dry air entrainment or entrainment of cloud condensation nuclei even into the updrafts. One thing that I notice is that a lot of times those almost partially elevated high base supercells are the largest hail producers out in the high plains, whereas in the locations of the Mid-South and the Corn Belt here, even when you get those extreme CAPE values, just a lot of times you don't get those very large hailstones as well, even when you get an abundance of tornado reports like what we're seeing here. And I think a lot of that is due to the low-level shear. There's a paper by Kumjian et al. I know Dr. Kumjian, Matt Kumjian, a friend of mine that used to be a friend of mine there at the University of Oklahoma, is now at Penn State Meteorology Department. I know that he has done some papers on the role of low-level shear and very large hail, and why maybe in the speed shear, pure speed shear contribution in the lowest 500 meters there in the Mid-South doesn't result in very large hailstones, but then you get those big directional shear profiles of that flip-flop above about 2 kilometers in the sounding, leading to some pretty big hail across portions of the high plains. But anyway, just because there are large tornadoes doesn't necessarily mean significant hail is a guarantee. And here you can see the infrared satellite loop. Notice that lead complex of storms that went through northeastern Iowa, through southeastern Minnesota, central and southern Wisconsin. There you can see it right now over Lake Michigan there on that part of the loop. There's that complex of storms moving through northern Illinois and also southern Wisconsin. And then in the wake of that, it left behind an outflow boundary. And that often happens here in Iowa. A lot of times, though, there's a lot of sinking motion behind those lead MCSs or complexes of storms, and that can mitigate the development of supercell storms along the outflow boundary in its wake. In this case, there was another jet streak that you could even see on satellite. You could see those gravity waves coming out of Nebraska there, showing that there was definitely a disturbance. Right entrance region of the jet there impinging on that target area. That helped to initiate those storms. Convergence along the outflow boundary as well certainly helped to initiate those storms. And there was plenty of wind shear. The model that we were looking at that really ramped up that low-level jet across western Iowa and then slid that max across northern Iowa yesterday. Definitely did verify. But there you can see that complex of storms at Lake Michigan. And then that outflow boundary draped across central and northern Iowa. 2 supercell storms fired initially, or 2 little clusters, and those produced the most significant tornadoes. And then there was another supercell to the north of Waterloo that produced what appeared to be a decent tornado. There was quite a bit of damage in portions of northern Iowa there. And it looked like a pretty stout tornado. I could see some helical vortices within those rope tornadoes as well. And this shows that the WRAP model. I produced this image just as that tornado outbreak was about to begin. It was, of course, too late for me to get to Iowa at this point. But this was the lead MCS up here. That was moving through southeastern Minnesota, northeastern Iowa, and into western Nebraska. I figured you could work this shelf cloud crossing the Mississippi River for an epic chase, and then pop back down into northern Iowa along this outflow boundary zone. And you can see this nose of instability building up, 3,000 Cape, bumping up against this differential heating boundary. And there was plenty of upper-level jet dynamics, so that the subsidence behind that lead MCS didn't outweigh everything. You still had some cyclonic curvature and lift in the mid and upper levels coming out of Nebraska toward western Iowa, and that was able to fire these 2 storms right along that outflow boundary. Iowa there is in the lower portion of that screen. Plenty of 0 to 1 kilometer shear in excess of 200 meters squared per second squared along that west-east oriented boundary. You can see that the state of Iowa here is centered right within that image. There's Iowa right there. And I'm a big fan of chasing with Iowa. I know a lot of storm chasers don't like chasing in Iowa because sometimes it can bust. And a lot of times behind these MCSs and outflow boundaries, sometimes that they won't produce. But you can see how these winds are starting to back across western Iowa while you had these veered winds coming out of Nebraska. So even some convergence across western Iowa was sufficient to fire those storms. But then that jet streak overspread, the destabilized outflow boundary, fired those storms along that west-east oriented differential heating boundary. Differential heating boundaries are key to producing tornadoes in all kinds of setups, whether you're in the Corn Belt, High Plains, Texas Panhandle. That March 13 event where we were down into the Texas Panhandle definitely was a differential heating boundary type of an event. Even those differential heating boundaries nestled within a very large warm sector. But you can kind of see how these winds were veering a little bit back behind that MCS. A lot of times when these MCSs roll through, most of the backed winds are located just ahead of them. But in this case, this is such an elongated system. It had that positive tilt going as well. You still had some pressure falls back to the west, and that caused these surface winds to back along that outflow boundary. That also enhanced the convergence along that differential heating boundary, and you were able to fire those 2 supercell storms in central Iowa that did produce tornadoes. Today, there's a lot of marginal risks as well. They're circled in black there. The northeastern Colorado has been added to a marginal risk. Possibly could get a land spout out there in the vicinity of the Denver cyclone. Certainly could happen. A couple other target areas. There's a 2% tornado risk along that elongated frontal boundary as well. But the winds veer along this boundary as well. You can see that the surface winds are parallel to that frontal boundary. There's already some blobs of convection and stratiform rain out there along that frontal boundary. The forecast models are showing one of those blobs to intensify on approach to west central Illinois there with a mega shelf, likely a complex of storms, and then a reinvigoration of storms as well across southern Kansas with a little bit more in the way of backed surface winds out there, hence that 2% tornado risk. But for the most part, this frontal boundary has these westerly veered winds all along its boundary, and that's contributing to a little bit marginal low-level shear and a reduced tornado threat. But then you can see these easterly surface winds, upslope winds here in the post-frontal environment. in northeastern Colorado. Not an incredibly moist post-frontal environment. Dew points on the surface map are in the upper 50s across northeastern Colorado, but that's enough to get about 1,000 to 1,500 CAPE there. You could target the Greeley area, maybe down toward DIA, and get a land spout type of an event out here, interacting with the Denver convergence zone or the Denver cyclone, an area of convergence or cyclonic vorticity that develops in northeastern Colorado. So when you get these storms that develop near it, even if they do have marginal deep layer shear, when they interact with that Denver convergence zone or Denver vorticity zone, they do have a tendency of producing landspout tornadoes. And another target is in eastern Ontario or western Quebec, ahead of that surface low that resulted in all those tornadoes yesterday. I think that you could get some tornadoes up here, well to the northeast of the Georgian Bay area, near the Quebec-Ontario border. I think you got more than sufficient wind shear up there, about a 125 to 150, 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative shear. That would be the mainstream target today if you could get up into Canada. They're right along that Ontario-Quebec border. You could also target the nose of the instability coming out of northeastern Indiana, northwestern Ohio, into southeastern lower Michigan. Might get a mesoscale accident down there, but even on that nose of instability, surface winds are westerly, largely parallel to that frontal boundary in southern lower Michigan there. So really near the Quebec-Ontario border would be the most favorable area for supercells and that tornado threat up here. I hope some of my friends out there, including Tom Smetana, who drives the Blue Moose out of Ottawa, is out there chasing. Last I heard, he was in the high plains of Canada as well. But there's a marginal risk, a 2% tornado probability. No tornado probabilities in northeastern Colorado, but with a Denver cyclone, magic can happen in Colorado. And right now you can see in that post-frontal environment, winds are still out of the northeast or relatively weak up there right now, but still sufficient moisture to result in that marginal risk, maybe some flash flood warnings as well across some of the higher terrain. I saw that question pop up on the bottom right. I end up driving about 150,000 miles a year, especially 2016 through 2020. I was chasing everything. Ever since my divorce, I was devoted to chasing everything and devoting my entire life to storm chasing and these live briefings. But then these last few years, I gradually started to run out of gas. I caught the coronavirus as well, and I had it really minor, but I think I definitely became one of those long haulers, and that definitely took a little bit of wind out of my sails, but I was still able to get about 20 tornadoes this year, chase the whole entire time. Sometimes I would cut off the chases a little bit early, but now I'm definitely recharging, getting ready to dominate hurricane season and this winter in 2022. Working hard on cardiovascular exercise out here, riding my bike as well, nonstop, eating the activated charcoal, so definitely feeling pretty good. And I should have been out in Iowa. I easily could have made it. I'm in good shape. Got a resting heart rate of like 47 beats per minute. There's absolutely no excuse on why I shouldn't have been out in northeastern Iowa. And it hurts. To be completely honest, it hurts missing all those tornadoes, but I also use it as an opportunity to celebrate the storm chasers that were out there. The hard workers that were out there chasing and got those tornadoes. So I'm really happy for all of those storm chasers that were out there intercepting these storms. I do wish, though, that I could have streamed live for you guys out there, of course. I just wish I was out there. I should have been out there. That's it. That's really the only thing to say. So we'll just break down the environment that caused those tornadoes. We knew it was going to happen. We hyped it for the days leading up, and that's just what happens. That's a little lesson in life right there. You got to live by your own motto, and you'll do well. If you don't, though, then you'll fall flat. That's what happened to me, but that's okay. There'll be more tornadoes, more intercepts, and I'll continue to go live here. Here is the RAT model for this afternoon, and at 22Z, notice that little cold pool enhanced wind shear zone in southern Kansas, but you can see that blob in general of about 100 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. And we did see how there were some localized backed winds further down this front into southern Kansas. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a tornado warning or two out of that southern Kansas zone Look at that. You got about 150 to 200, 0 to 1 kilometer shear there in southern Kansas. That includes Wichita, even down maybe into northern Oklahoma as well, down into Kay County, back toward Gizmo's birthplace down there in Enid in northwestern Oklahoma. But then notice how the wind shear is reduced across the Missouri and Illinois targets, and that's because those surface winds have a large westerly component. They're parallel to that frontal boundary. There is a lot more wind shear, though, near the Ontario-Quebec border for those supercell storms, including the threat of tornadoes. And then look at about 22Z, how those storms fire over northern Colorado, but in an environment of relatively marginal effective helicities, probably a little bit better 0 to 3 kilometer shear, just because of how the nature of the wind shear profiles in the high plains, being easterly up to about 2 kilometers and then flipping over to a westerly direction. But if I'm chasing the Denver cyclone today, I'm looking for land spout type tornadoes out there. Beautiful high base structure, land spouts. The moisture is not that bad in this post-frontal environment with dew point temperatures in the upper 50s. I could see it happening up near Cheyenne as well up there. Due northerly storm motions just ripping down the front range. You got about 20 knots at 500 out of the northwest across northeastern Colorado over top those 10 knot easterly winds, creating 30 knots of bulk shear, which is marginal for supercell storms, but you can get land spout tornadoes. And then there in southern Kansas, you got about 25 knots at 500. Also marginal bulk shear down there, even with those due southerly surface winds here, 25, 30 knots of bulk shear across southern Kansas. So it's definitely going to have to be a mesoscale accident, some type of a transient supercell structure there across southern Kansas and in northern Oklahoma to generate that tornado threat. But if anybody's chasing up near the Ontario-Quebec border, you got 45 knots at 500 up there. Decent jet dynamics. You're ahead of an 850 low. In terms of your low-level jet, you got about 20, 30 knots increasing to 40 near that border. So I think there's going to be some tornadoes up there across western Quebec, near the Ontario border. Definitely, I guarantee you there's favorable wind shear up there. We got about 200 to 300, 0 to 1 kilometer shear in that belt from southwestern Quebec into southeastern Ontario to the north of Toronto. Even down, you get some Lake Ontario, Lake Breeze interaction with the tail end Charlie there in southeastern Ontario. But I think there's going to be some tornado warnings. Southwestern Quebec, southeastern Ontario up there. Just don't see how it wouldn't happen. Let me see if Vince sent me a text. No, he's doing a class right now, but I'm hoping to include his video in one of these lives and maybe even have him on as a guest to discuss his storm chasing experience yesterday, see how that went up there. But right now we are breaking down Ontario and Quebec target, 1,000 to 1,500 surface space cape, 2 to 300, 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. So I do think southwestern Quebec into southeastern Ontario, there's going to be some supercell storms developing as early as 1 to 2 p.m. There from southwestern Ontario into southeastern Quebec, southeastern Ontario there, well to the north of Toronto, up near that Quebec border. I do think there's going to be some supercell storms up there. Decent low-level wind shear, decent instability. You're ahead of the 850 low out there. So I'm almost certain there's going to be tornado warnings near the Quebec-Ontario border. You can look at the HRRR up there as well. Don't worry about me seeing these tornadoes. I can handle missing them. That's kind of part of storm chasing, is grinding through 25 years of being able to handle busts or fear of missing out, that type of thing. So here you can see the target near Ontario, Quebec, within that belt of 45 knots, just ahead of our flattened out trough that led to those tornadoes yesterday in northern Iowa. Here you can see that the belt of southwesterly winds parallel to the front from southern Michigan all the way back to southern Kansas. And we're going to be chasing a ridge runner type of an event. Just a subtle little jet streak coming over the top of the ridge in this post-frontal environment in Colorado today for that potential for supercells and maybe a land spout. But here's the strongest 850 winds, and the most backed 850 winds are ahead of this 850 low a bit here near the Ontario, Quebec border, southwestern Ontario. Decent 35 to 40 knot 850 winds up there. So that's where that tornado threat is maximized, up in this zone, southeastern Ontario, southwestern Quebec. And you do have some decent residual 850s that are all parallel, all out of the southwesterly direction, but I could see some enhanced damaging winds at the nose of that instability, northeastern Indiana into southern lower Michigan. Maybe even a tornado threat out there. We can look at a forecast photograph. Well, probably not. Everything is just too parallel to the front. A decent photograph there in southern Kansas, however. Oh, Vince just said to use his video. So I could show you that. Let's pull up the video here on Twitter. I want to show you his video. Just incredible. Here it is. Oh, there it is, yes. So here you can see Vince's video. Very close range, looking off to the north. Elephant trunk tornado. Very rapid motion on the debris cloud there at the base. Lofting corn stalks. Textbook pan up as well. That's definitely ideal storm chasing there when you're up close to that debris cloud. Look up and down the funnel. That's a move that I enjoy doing when storm chasing as well. Looking up and down that bright white elephant trunk tornado there. And this is great positioning as well, just to the south of the tornado, moving left to the right. You can see the tilt of the tornado as the friction of the earth drags that vortex just a little bit behind it. But this is definitely one of the best videos out there that I've seen so far from this event. There's also a very close range storm chase from Adam Lucio out there. Large cone tornado coming very close to their vehicle. He was running some tours out there. But just a textbook Iowa tornado there. See that very large elephant trunk tornado. And you can support Vince at twistor.online, twistor.online. I know his video is also going to be seen at AccuWeather as well today. So that's some good news. So he's able to push that out to AccuWeather. But a good up-and-coming storm chaser here that's already a veteran storm chaser that's getting some great videos. Has a great as-live game out there too, standing in front of the storm, describing all of the detail with it. Great editor as well, maintaining his channel up there, editing a lot of great educational content as well. So Vince is definitely one of the up-and-coming stars of the storm chasing community. Vince Wilty, I'm not sure how to say the last name, I should probably ask, but we hung out in Makashika State Park there in southeastern Montana looking for potato-shaped rocks ahead of that tornado event near the Montana-North Dakota border. But probably some of the tornadoes of the year here in Iowa, and not surprisingly, they were along an outflow boundary, as were most of the tornadoes during the month of May as well, as China is just getting hammered by violent tornadoes and big outbreaks of tornadoes out there in eastern China. Even portions of Europe are getting tornadoes. I do think that 2022 is going to come alive in a big way this tornado season, but just an incredible video of one of those tornadoes here in Iowa. 45 preliminary reports. That's going to be trimmed down, probably a couple of dozen tornadoes. I wouldn't be surprised to have been 15 or 20 tornadoes there within Iowa. So I'd love to have Vince on as a guest to discuss this storm chasing experience. Maybe it'll be this evening. Maybe tomorrow morning. I'm going to start having more storm chasers available for these live updates and live briefing, storm chaser content, storm chaser perspectives on storms. We'll break down case studies as well of big time outbreaks. This will be one of them. But definitely incredible video there from Vince. Twistor Storm Chasers. He's doing some great things out there, chasing a lot as well. Great meteorologist, forecasting as well. Great storm chaser. You can see just the natural angles out there. The last true art form of our science is storm chasing here. Positioning relative to the storm to get certain light that you want while staying out of harm's way. Combination of up-close storm chasing, time lapses from long distance. It's just fun to see everybody's different styles, but I definitely do appreciate the pan up there, close range to the base of the tornado. Good work here by the Twistor Storm Chasers chasing down that tornado yesterday. And again, it was behind that MCS outflow boundary, differential heating boundary draped across central northern Iowa there. Supercell storms erupted in that environment. I did that post of those two different storms, and then another cluster developed to the northeast of that, just northwest of Waterloo as well, that ended up producing a tornado. And there were some nocturnal tornado warnings as well, as everything congealed into a line and continued off to the east. But once again, lesson learned. I've been storm chasing for a long time, and I constantly have to remind myself to never stop chasing. And this is an event that happened yesterday that is just a big time reminder that I've got to stick to my storm chasing motto of never stop chasing. And but I am still trying to recharge here, of course. But that's no excuse. I should have been out in Iowa chasing that thing. Definitely am a little disappointed that I wasn't out there, but that's real life. That happens. It's not all sunshine and happiness out there. I definitely should have been storm chasing. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this live update. Really appreciate everybody here. If it weren't for Facebook supporters, I wouldn't be out there able to storm chase. And should have been out there in Iowa. I just got to get my grit and tenacity back that I had post-divorce from 2016 through 2020. And definitely have it. I just should have been out to Iowa. I should have made the 13-hour drive. I was planning on it, and then ended up being a vegetable yesterday instead. Didn't even go live, but yep, won't happen again, everybody. And look at that tornado in the background there. Reminds me almost of a real small version of the Dodge City tornado, where you're able to pan up and down that bright white funnel from the south side looking north at this tornado, moving west to east. You can see how the friction is kind of dragging the vortex a little bit back behind it, just launching corn stalks like there's no tomorrow. But glad to hear everybody's okay as well in Iowa. That's at least the latest update that I heard. Always great news to hear that there's no loss of life out there, but still could change as the recovery effort continues out there. I know there was quite a bit of damage across central and northern Iowa, but great work out there, storm chasers that were in the field providing reports through all platforms that we were able, through social media and whatnot. Congratulations, everybody out there that intercepted these tornadoes and helped warn people in the path of these storms as well. I know we hyped it in the days leading up to this, and then just should have finished what we started and went out there ourselves, storm chasing and being out there working these different target areas. So thank you, everybody, for joining me. We'll break down more case studies on these Midwest events and discuss more of those theories behind why there's not always very large hail, even during these big Cape events that do yield a lot of tornadoes, especially these post-MCS outflow boundary type of events. Probably more of some mid-south type shear profiles along that differential heating boundary as well. And you may have noticed that during the second half of May, many of those outflow boundary setups, kind of a different style of wind shear than traditional high plains type setups, those also didn't have a ton of very large hail, which is quite interesting out there. So thank you, everybody. I think that the answer is likely kinematic and thermodynamic in nature, kind of a combination of the two. But the answer definitely isn't all kinematic as well. There are thermodynamic reasons why there weren't tornadoes as well, and everything kind of goes hand in hand anyway. The kinematics or the winds and wind shear type situations with the thermodynamics as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining me for my weather report this morning. Never stop chasing. That's important.